One voice silenced, one voice unleashed. The lesson came too late, but it hit hard. The afternoon sun poured through the tall, dust-streaked windows of room 214, casting golden streaks across a wall lined with trophies, some old and forgotten, some shining with recent glory. A whiteboard in the corner read, "Regional Debate Qualifier, 10 days left." The room buzzed with energy as students shuffled in, voices overlapping with anticipation and nerves, laughter, footsteps, the soft rustle of paper notes, posters of past debate champions stared down from the walls, faded but proud. The air smelled faintly of old books and dry erase markers. Near the center of the room stood Layla Bennett. Tall for her age, her presence filled the space long before she even spoke. Her natural curls were pulled back into a low puff, and her almond brown skin glowed under the late sun. Layla didn't just speak, she commanded. Her voice rang clear, rich and unashamed, confident, rhythmic. She was rehearsing a rebuttal about justice and education, pacing slightly as her hands danced in sync with her words. Every sentence struck like a drumbeat. She wasn't loud for the sake of it. Her voice had purpose. It was her armor dot across the room. Emily Price sat cross-legged on top of a desk, flipping through a leather-bound debate notebook. Her blonde hair was neatly tied in a braid that looped around her head like a crown, and her sweater was crisp, pale pink, with her initials embroidered above the heart. Her expression soured as Layla raised her voice again. She leaned sideways and whispered to her friend Madison. Her lips curled in annoyance. Why is she always so loud? The whisper wasn't exactly quiet, but it was sharp enough to cut through. The buzz. Layla's voice wavered for just a moment, her eyes flickering toward Emily. She didn't respond. She just kept going. Emily didn't hate Layla, not really. But something about her boldness, her refusal to soften grated on her. Emily came from a world where girls like her were praised for being eloquent, poised, refined. Layla's style was raw, forceful, emotional. Too emotional. Mr. Davis, the debate coach, stood at the front of the room, clipboard in hand. He was a tired man in his late 40s, but his passion for debate never seemed to fade. A former state champion himself, he now dedicated his life to molding young minds, even when they clashed. "All right, listen up," he called out, clapping once. "Pairings for the regional qualifier are final, and I don't want to hear complaints." He looked down at his sheet. Team 3, Layla Bennett and Emily Price. The room fell into a brief silence, followed by a few exchanged glances and suppressed chuckles. Layla blinked. Emily froze. Emily straightened slowly, her voice tight and controlled. "Mr. Davis." "I usually partner with Rachel." Mr. Davis raised a hand before she could finish. "And Rachel's out this season with mono. This pairing is final. I think you two will make an excellent team, different strengths, different perspectives, balance." Layla didn't smile, but she nodded once. Emily forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The bell rang soon after, and backpacks zipped as students began filing out. Emily stayed behind, watching Layla pack up her notes. There was a subtle stiffness to Layla's movements, like she was holding something back. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she slipped her note cards into her folder. Emily approached, hesitating. "Look, it's fine. We'll make it work. I just hope we can find a way to not step on each other's style." Layla looked up, eyes steady. Her voice was calm. "I have no problem adjusting if it helps the argument. But don't confuse my voice for noise." Emily blinked. Layla walked past her and out the door without waiting for a reply. The hallway swallowed Layla up, but her words lingered like the echo of a gavel hitting wood. Emily stood alone in the classroom, silent for a long moment. Outside, the light was already beginning to fade from gold into a deeper amber, casting long shadows on the trophies they both now had to chase together. The next few days passed in a slow, simmering silence. Emily walked into room 214 each afternoon with her polished notebook and matching pens, lips pressed into a line, spine ramrod straight. She sat across from Layla at the long debate table, tapping her pen anxiously as Layla adjusted her mic level or tweaked her opening remarks. The air between them buzzed with an unspoken friction like two magnets forced to face the wrong poles. Emily was used to calm, orderly rehearsals with Rachel, her usual partner. Rachel was quiet, methodical, always agreeable. Their arguments were rehearsed down to the breath, perfectly timed and civil. But Layla disrupted that harmony. Layla didn't rehearse with Emily so much as around her. She would scribble fresh ideas in the margins, go off script during mock debates, challenge angles mid-sentence. She used her voice like a blade sharp, deliberate, and always just a bit too much for Emily's liking. On the third day of practice, it finally bubbled over. They were midway through a mock round on criminal justice reform, practicing in front of Mr. Davis and a few upperclassmen. Layla stood as she delivered her rebuttal, voice rising with passion, her tone echoing off the classroom walls. We cannot discuss reform without acknowledging systemic bias. The data isn't just numbers, it's lives. The room was still for a beat. Then Mr. Davis nodded. Good energy. A bit fast, but compelling. Layla sat back down. EXHALING. Emily didn't wait for Davis to finish his notes. She turned toward Layla, her words clipped and icy. Can you tone it down? Layla turned slowly. Emily continued, gesturing vaguely. The volume. Intensity. It comes off too aggressive. People don't respond well to that. Layla's jaw tightened, but her eyes remained calm. She looked at Emily, really looked at her. The pastel cardigan. A manicured fingers gripping a monogrammed pen. The practiced restraint in every gesture. Proper. Layla let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. Too aggressive, she repeated. Her voice was softer now, but laced with weight. Too loud. Emily shifted in her seat. I just mean we want to win, right? Judges like poise, not theatrics. Layla took a slow breath, her fingers still on her note cards. I don't use my voice to perform, Emily. I use it to be heard. That's how I was taught. She didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again. Mr. Davis glanced up, but said nothing, sensing the tension like a wire pulled tight across the table. After practice, Layla packed up in silence. Emily lingered behind, watching her. There was a flicker of something in Emily's face, confusion, maybe guilt, but she said nothing as Layla left the room. At night, Layla sat at the kitchen table with her grandmother, flipping through debate articles and scribbling counterpoints. The house was modest, but full of warmth, with bookshelves lined with worn legal texts and Black history memoirs. Her grandmother sipped tea and watched her. Long day? She asked. Layla nodded. My partner thinks I'm too loud. Her grandmother raised an eyebrow. Too loud for who? Layla gave a tired smile. Everyone, apparently. Her grandmother leaned back in her chair, eyes wise and steady. Don't let small minds make you shrink, baby. They've been telling girls like us to be quiet since forever. Layla didn't reply right away. Her fingers traced the edge of a quote written in her notebook. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. The next day, practice was quieter. Not by design, just strained. Mr. Davis asked them to redo their closing argument. Emily went first, her tone measured, every word calculated. When Layla followed, her voice carried the room again, but there was a subtle difference. She wasn't yelling. She was owning the space dot when she finished. One of the seniors, Malik, clapped slowly. That was fire. Emily looked down. Later, as they left the room, Emily hesitated beside the door. "Hey, Layla," she said almost too quietly. Layla turned. Waiting. Emily fumbled with her sleeve. "I didn't mean to offend you. I've never debated with someone like you before." Layla blinked. "Someone like me?" Emily hesitated. "I mean, you're bold. It's different." Layla nodded slowly. "It is different. Doesn't mean it's wrong." They stared at each other in the fading afternoon light. Then Layla walked away. Again, her shoulders squared out, and for the first time, Emily didn't feel quite as sure of herself. The smell of cinnamon and old paper filled Layla's living room as dusk settled outside the windows. The soft hum of a box fan blew gently through sheer curtains, lifting them like slow breaths. Books thick, creased, and loved-lined the shelves in uneven stacks. Framed photographs hung slightly crooked on the wall, some of Layla as a baby, some of her mother in graduation robes, and one large black-and-white image of a younger woman standing at a courthouse podium, fist raised. That woman now sat across from Layla at the kitchen table, watching her granddaughter with patient, expectant eyes. "Again," said Grandma Ruth, leaning forward with her chin resting on one hand. Her silver braids were tied back with a green scarf, and the gold in her glasses caught the last light of day. Layla stood with her shoulders back, fingers gripped around the edges of her note cards. Her voice rose and fell like music, sharp with conviction. She wasn't just reciting points, she was feeling them, shaping them into something that reached beyond the script. Her words filled the room the way her grandmother once filled a courtroom. And without addressing the disproportionate sentencing of marginalized communities, Layla continued, "You cannot claim justice, because silence in the face of inequality is not neutrality, it's complicity." She paused for breath, chest rising. Grandma Ruth nodded slowly, pride glinting in her eyes. "There she is." Layla smiled, her shoulders relaxing just slightly, but then the smile faded. "My partner says I'm too aggressive, too loud." Grandma didn't react right away. She reached for her tea, took a sip, and set it down with a soft clink. She said, her voice low and calm, seasoned with a kind of strength that had weathered courtrooms and protests and decades of quiet resistance. "They've been calling us that for generations. Loud, angry, difficult." Layla looked down. Ruth continued, voice gentle. "Your voice is your power, baby. You come from a long line of women who had to shout just to be heard. You don't have to get smaller." "For anyone," Layla nodded. Her throat tightened. "Let them squirm a little," Grandma added with a wink. "That means they're listening." They both laughed quietly. Later that evening, as Layla packed her bag for school, she slipped a folded photo into her notebook. It was Grandma Ruth, 1972, speaking on the steps of the state courthouse, megaphone in one hand, protest signs behind. Her mouth was open mid-speech, fire in her eyes. Across town, Emily sat cross-legged on her canopy bed, twirling a gel pen in her fingers. Her room was immaculate cream-colored walls, fairy lights, gold-framed mirrors. An expensive laptop sat open in front of her, playing a debate final from last year's nationals. On the screen, a pair of students sparred with articulate passion, taking turns at the podium with crisp, formal delivery. Neither raised their voice. Neither deviated from script. Emily paused the video and sighed. From the hallway, her mother's voice filtered through, sharp and agitated. "I told them this wasn't going to work," she was saying into the phone. "She's paired with that girl again, the loud one." Emily froze, the pen still in her hand. "She's always so emotional," her mom continued, voice muffled. Honestly, I don't know what the school is thinking. Debating isn't about shouting people down. It's about presenting facts respectfully. There was a pause, and then the telltale clinking of ice in a glass. I just hope she doesn't drag Emily's scores down. She's worked too hard for this. Emily sat perfectly still. Her eyes drifted toward her closet door, which was covered in medals and ribbons from past competitions. Underneath, taped to the wood, was a printed quote she'd always liked. Speak clearly, or don't speak at all. But now, it made her stomach twist. She hadn't told her mother what had happened during practice. Not about the comment. Not about the way Layla had looked at her afterward. Not about how those words, too loud, still echoed in her own head at night. Emily reached for her phone, opened Instagram, and scrolled absent-mindedly. She paused on Layla's latest post, a short video of her standing outside a local community center, speaking at a youth event about justice in schools. Layla's voice rang out from the speakers, strong and fearless. Emily turned the volume down. But she kept watching. There was something magnetic about Layla's presence. Something uncomfortable, too. It challenged everything Emily had believed about what good debating looked like. She closed the app. Her room felt colder somehow. For the first time, she didn't know if she agreed with her mother. And for the first time, she didn't know if she wanted to. The air inside the regional tournament venue buzzed with tension. A cold draft snuck through the tall glass windows of the civic auditorium, making the paper banners flutter slightly. Parents, teachers, and judges milled about in quiet pockets of nervous energy, their whispers blending into a soft hum of anxiety. Backstage, the walls were thin. Every cough and shuffle from the audience bled through the drywall. The sharp scent of hairspray, paper, and coffee clung to the air. Students from competing schools leaned against lockers, reviewing cue cards under flickering lights. Layla stood beside a fold-out table, flipping through her notes. Her curls were pinned back, edges sleek, and she wore a simple navy blazer over a white blouse. She looked calm on the outside, but her fingers moved quickly across the pages. Her eyes darted from quote to stat, connecting dots like puzzle pieces in her mind. The faint scribbles of her own handwriting ran between printed paragraphs. Speak until silence listens. Your voice is resistance. Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, Maya Angelou, women who'd built their lives with words that refused. Taboo. A shadow moved beside her. Emily. She stood stiffly, arms crossed, her pale gray pantsuit wrinkle-free and pristine. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a whisper soaked in irritation. You're going to get us disqualified. Layla glanced up, blinking. Emily took a step closer. You go off script. You don't follow time cues. You make it too emotional. It looks, she paused, biting her lip, sloppy. Layla said nothing. Emily's voice sharpened. People are watching. Our school's reputation is on the line, and you're treating this like a TED Talk. Still, silence. Layla didn't argue, didn't frown. She simply turned away, walked to the other end of the room, and sat on the floor with her back against the wall. She opened her notebook again, methodically flipping until she found the quote she was looking for. Her fingers traced it once, like it was a memory. I am deliberate and afraid of nothing. Audre Lorde, her eyes closed briefly. A breath in, a breath out. On the other side of the room, Emily watched her. Something about Layla's composure, her quiet refusal to defend herself, felt more unnerving than if she had shouted. 10 minutes later, the announcer called their names. Next on stage, Eastview High Emily Price and Layla Bennett. They stepped out under the lights. The stage was wide, the podium stark and tall, casting long shadows on the floor. Rows of judges sat behind neatly folded arms. The audience, a sea of faces, leaned forward in polite anticipation. Emily opened. Her voice, steady and smooth, laid the foundation. Facts, figures, definitions. She delivered the introduction like a scalpel clean and careful. Then it was Layla's turn. Her heels clicked softly as she approached the mic. For a heartbeat, the room felt too still. Then she spoke. "Before we talk policy," she began, her voice low but firm, "we have to talk reality. Justice isn't theory, it's lived. And if you've never felt its absence, it's easy to think it's already here." Her words bloomed across the room like waves. Not loud but full. Certain. Her tone was rich with empathy, yet sharp with resolve. Emily found herself glancing sideways, feeling something strange, almost like awe. Layla wasn't performing. She was revealing something. And somewhere along the way, Emily began to respond. Her rebuttals came quicker, more fluid. Layla would drop a bold point, and Emily would thread it into a clear, reasoned follow-up. Logic and fire, structure and soul. They danced without ever planning the choreography. When the final bell rang, the room was hushed, and the applause came first in a ripple, then a roar. People stood. Some judges nodded with barely concealed smiles. Layla exhaled slowly. Emily stood frozen. The adrenaline still buzzed in her limbs, but beneath it was something else, a tightness in her chest. She couldn't name. As they exited the stage, students from other schools clapped them on the yell. Back. A coach from a rival team even offered a quiet. That was incredible, but Emily couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Not yet. Outside, in the hallway, as the crowd thinned, she finally turned to Layla. "You carried that," she said quietly. Layla gave a modest shrug, her notebook still in her hand. "I mean it," Emily said again. Her voice tinged with something that sounded almost like shame. Layla looked at her, not unkindly, but with a depth that made Emily feel exposed. "You didn't think I could," Layla said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't angry, either. Just true. Emily looked away. Inside the auditorium, their names were being announced as winners. The clapping rose again. And for the first time, Emily didn't smile. A Monday after the regional tournament, Eastview High was buzzing. Word of the win had spread like wildfire. Posters appeared on the school bulletin board, hastily taped up and printed in bold. "Congrats to our champs, Emily and Layla." But as the day unfolded, it became clear which name the students, and even some teachers, chose to remember. Emily walked into homeroom to a small round of applause. A few classmates clapped her on the shoulder. "You crushed it," someone said. "Eastview's own Elle Woods," joked another, making her blush. Layla entered moments later, quieter than usual. She nodded at the teacher, took her seat at the back, and pulled out her notebook. No one clapped. No one even looked her way. By lunchtime, the story had shifted. Emily basically saved the whole thing. One girl whispered in the cafeteria. "Lying. She did all the structure stuff." "The other girl just yelled a lot," said another. Layla sat alone at a table by the window, stirring her mashed potatoes without eating them. She could hear every word. She didn't say anything, but her pen tapped against her tray in a slow, rhythmic beat. Tap, 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 like something simmering just beneath the surface. That afternoon, Mr. Davis pulled them both aside in room 214. "I'm proud of you," he said, looking between them. "You made the school proud. Let's prep hard for nationals. This could be our year." Layla offered a polite nod. Emily smiled, though her stomach turned a little at how easily Davis turned to her afterward. "Emily, I'd love if you could mentor the freshman team next month. They could really learn from your composure." Layla's name wasn't mentioned again. The next day, Layla barely spoke in practice. She reviewed notes, answered questions when needed, but her fire had dimmed. Her responses were clinical, clipped. The warmth was gone. She didn't meet Emily's eyes once. Emily noticed, and it bothered her more than she expected. She approached Layla in the hallway after the bell. "Hey, you okay?" Layla closed her locker slowly. "I'm fine." "You've been quiet. I thought that's what you wanted." Emily opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. Layla walked away, her back straight, her silence heavier than any argument they'd ever had. 2 days later, Emily stayed after school to pick up a forgotten folder. As she passed the faculty lounge, she heard voices low, casual, unaware of their volume. The door was slightly ajar. She paused when she heard her name. "Emily's got the polish, sure," said Mr. Davis. "She's clean, organized. Judges. Love that." Another voice, Ms. Ramirez, the English teacher. "But Layla? That girl moves people. She makes them feel something." "You can't teach that." Double quotes, Mr. Davis chuckled. "Yeah, but Layla's always been unpredictable, hard to manage. Too emotional sometimes." "You mean honest?" Ramirez said, her tone sharpened. "You know she's been in this program longer than any of them? She trained half the team in middle school, but she never got captain." A pause. "I mean, if we're being honest," Ramirez continued, "it's not about performance. It's about who makes the school look good. And Layla doesn't fit the brand." Emily felt her face flush. Her hands gripped the folder tighter. A strange mix of shame and recognition washed over her, like someone had said out loud the thing she'd been trying not to admit even to herself. She backed away before they could hear her and slipped into the hallway. Her feet carried her toward the debate room, though she didn't know why. It was empty, quiet. The echo of her footsteps followed her in. She sat at Layla's desk. Her hand brushed over Layla's notebook, which had been left behind, and she hesitated before opening it. Inside were pages of annotated quotes, stats, arguments. But scattered between them were handwritten thoughts, lines of reflection, pieces of Layla's inner world. "They only cheer when I sound like them. Every time I win, they act like it's luck. Do I have to lose myself to be seen?" Emily closed the notebook gently. She didn't know what to say, or if she even had the right to say anything anymore. All she knew was that something had shifted, something she couldn't take back, and she wasn't sure how or if it could be fixed. The Grand Hall in Washington, D.C. seemed to breathe with history. The walls soared upward into high domed ceilings, where golden chandeliers cast a warm, solemn glow over rows of velvet-lined seats. Marble columns lined the perimeter like silent witnesses to generations of voices that had echoed through this very space, some celebrated, some forgotten. Layla stood quietly backstage, listening to the low murmur of the audience filing in. The sound of shuffling programs, muted coughs, and distant laughter mingled with the clicking of cameras and the young scratch of shoes against polished floors. She closed her eyes and inhaled. This was it. The national debate final. Next to her, Emily sat hunched over a binder, her fingers white around the edges of the paper. She had barely spoken since they arrived in D.C., save for short logistical exchanges. Her usual neat bun was slightly loose, a few blonde strands falling over her temple. Hands trembled as she flipped through the prep round outline one more time. "I can't," she muttered. "This doesn't feel right. I'm not ready." Layla glanced down at her, then back at the stage curtains. Her voice was calm, even. "We are ready." Emily shook her head, panic tightening her chest. "No, I can't do this, not like this. These are real judges, news stations. This isn't our school gym, Layla." Layla didn't respond immediately. She walked toward the side of the stage and peeked through the curtain. The hall was already filling fast. Schools from every state were present, their uniforms proud and pressed. In the front row, a camera crew adjusted their lights. "National." Press. She turned back and crouched beside Emily. "Listen to me," she said, her tone soft but firm. "You don't have to be perfect right now. You just have to begin. I'll carry it if I need to." Emily looked up. For a moment, her eyes betrayed something unspoken humility, maybe, or fear, or the weight of knowing she wasn't the strongest voice anymore. The announcer's voice boomed through the sound system, representing Eastview High School, Emily Price, and Layla Bennett. Applause followed. Their cue. They walked out together, side by side, toward the polished oak podiums. The light blinded for a second, and the applause faded into the quiet click of judges' pens. The timer began. Emily opened. Her voice cracked slightly on the second line. She cleared her throat and pushed forward, but her flow was off. Her arguments lacked structure, her tone too hesitant. Layla's heart panged with recognition. It was the same fear she'd been accused of never having. The judges exchanged quick glances. Layla stepped in early, requesting a pivot in format. Emily didn't stop her. Now it was Layla at the mic. She began with a pause. Not hesitation, but intention. "Before we begin," she said, looking directly at the judges, "I want to talk about something that's often left behind in rooms like these. Something not found in handouts or diagrams. I want to talk about voice." The room stilled. She let the silence breathe, then continued. "I've been told my voice is too loud, too emotional, too much. And for a long time, I believed that. I believed I had to shrink to fit into places built without me in mind." Her eyes scanned the audience, not challengingly, but knowingly. "But here's what I've learned. The power of debate doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing at a podium like this, with everything you are, and refusing to whisper your truth." She gestured to the data she and Emily had prepared, linking it seamlessly to personal anecdotes, systemic history, and policy critique. Her tone rose and fell like music, never shouting, but never apologizing. She told a story, but buried within. It were razor-sharp arguments, indisputable stats, and masterful persuasion. "You can train articulation," she said near the end, "but you can't train lived experience. And when we silence that, we don't just lose perspective, we lose progress." There was a long pause when she finished. Then the hall erupted. People rose to their feet, some slow, like the moment had taken time to land. Others immediately, like they'd been waiting years to hear someone say exactly what she did. A standing ovation. Emily stood just behind her, unmoving. Her chest rose and fell as the clapping thundered on. She looked at Layla, this girl she had once called too loud, and saw her for the first time in full color, flawed, unpolished, unrelenting, and unforgettable. When Layla turned around, she didn't smile in triumph. She simply nodded, calm, grounded, as if to say, "This is what I've always known I could do." Emily's palms stung as she began clapping. But inside, her heart sank, not in envy, but in the realization that she hadn't just underestimated Layla, she had almost erased her. The auditorium had gone still again. The cheers had faded. The lights dimmed slightly, returning the grand hall to its polished, ceremonial calm. Final rounds had ended. Now the waiting began. Layla and Emily sat side by side in the front row, their school blazers buttoned, their hands resting in their laps. Around them, students from every corner of the country whispered nervously, legs bouncing, fingers gripping seat edges like lifelines. Layla's breathing was slow, measured. Her heart still beat in echoes of her final speech, but her face betrayed none of it. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, expression unreadable, almost serene. Emily, by contrast, fidgeted. Her throat was tight. Her hands were clasped so hard her knuckles were pale, and her eyes, red-rimmed, wet-blinked rapidly, trying to push something back down. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the announcer's voice, calm and deep through the grand PA system. This year's National Debate Championship was fiercely contested. Each team brought brilliance, courage, and conviction to the stage. Layla inhaled slowly. Emily bit her lip. But one team stood above the rest, not just for their mastery of argument, but for their ability to move, to challenge, and to transform the very conversation. A beat. The air felt heavy with suspense. The winners of this year's national title, Eastview High School, Layla Bennett and Emily Price. The hall erupted. The crowd rose again, cheering, clapping, some even whistling. Teachers from there. School leapt up. Mr. Davis stood and pumped his fist, eyes wide with pride. Layla blinked once, registering the moment. Then she slowly stood, shoulders square, eyes steady. Beside her, Emily remained seated. Layla turned slightly. "Come on," she said under her breath. But Emily didn't move. Her chin trembled, and her hands covered her mouth. Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet and hot, not from relief, not even from pride, from something deeper. Layla furrowed her brow. "Emily?" Emily finally stood, wiping her eyes quickly, trying to smile as cameras turned toward them, but it faltered. She walked with Layla to the center of the stage, the applause still thundering, but to Emily, it all sounded far away, like waves crashing on a distant shore. They were handed the trophy gold, gleaming and almost too heavy. Layla gripped it without flinching. Emily's hands barely closed around the base. Flashbulbs flickered. The MC invited them to say a few words. Layla leaned in toward the mic, thanked the judges, their coach, and the students who taught her that her voice mattered. The crowd loved it. Emily said nothing. When they exited the stage, ducking behind the thick velvet curtain into the quiet hush of backstage, Emily stopped. Layla turned toward her. That's when Emily whispered so softly, it was almost drowned by the fading applause. "I didn't deserve to stand next to you." Layla blinked. Emily's eyes were shining, her voice shaky. "I was the one who tried to shrink you, who told you to quiet down, who thought your voice was wrong just because it didn't sound like mine." Layla didn't say anything. "I'm sorry," Emily added, voice breaking. "Not because we won, but because I finally heard you, and now I can't believe I ever wanted to silence that." Layla looked at her for a long moment. Then finally she spoke, calm, low, but powerful. "No. You understand," she said, "why I to be loud." Emily's breath hitched. Layla didn't wait for a response. She walked past the curtain toward the hallway, where a flood of students and mentors waited, clapping her on the back, hugging her, saying her name. But in the hallway shadows, Emily stayed back, not because she didn't want the recognition, but because, for the first time, she understood the cost of it. She had spent the whole season trying to protect an image, a tradition, a version of success that didn't leave room for someone like Layla. And in doing so, she almost erased the very force that won them everything. The girl she once called too loud was now the one whose voice had shaken a national room. And this time, no one could ignore it.